Well, welcome to another episode of Conversations and Connections. Of course, this is the official podcast of the Family Crisis Center of East Texas. I'm Stuart Burson, the prevention coordinator for the agency. And today we're doing something a little different. We're having someone from an outside agency come and talk to us. So on the podcast, we do want to highlight some of the agencies that the Family Crisis Center works with and kind of find out what they do and how we all kind of work together to the same or for the same objective. So today from Harold's House, we have Ashley Cook, the Community Education Director for them. Ashley, thank you for coming by. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your welcome, and thank you for having me. We are a sister agency, and we just love working with y'all.
Yeah, we do a lot of things together, I know. Well, first of all, to kind of set the stage, if you don't mind, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that may have heard of Harold's House but may not know exactly what you guys do. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about Harold's House and the services you provide.
Sure. We are a nonprofit agency. We're what's called a Children's Advocacy Center, or a CAC, or sometimes you hear us call it CAC. So any of those things fit us. But
very attractive sounding acronyms, right?
That's right. So whatever works for you. We just love people working with us. But a Children's Advocacy Center, there are about 70 across the state of Texas. We cover 3 counties. We cover Angelina, Nacogdoches, and Sabine counties.
Okay.
And do you want me to talk a little bit about what we do?
Sure, please.
Before centers like Harold's House came along, whenever a child would make an outcry, whenever they would talk about something happening to them, maybe some sexual abuse or physical abuse, maybe they'd been through something or they'd witnessed a major crime, they would go to a lot of places to talk about that. Once the system came into play, they'd go to the police department, they might go to the courthouse and talk to attorneys, they might have to go to the hospital and get interviewed and examined there. It was really traumatic going to all these places, really that weren't designed with children in mind. If you think about like a hospital ER, wonderful place where we have just amazing professionals. My husband had an appendix go 2 years ago, and so we went through the ER here, and I just loved them. They took such wonderful care of him. But it's really not a place that's designed for children. It's big and scary things are happening there.
Anyone who experiences this sort of thing, it's traumatic, and so I'm sure it's probably tenfold for a child.
Right, and to actually talk about it. If you think about your closest, most intimate sexual experience, for example, and having to talk to somebody else that's not your partner about that, and especially if you're a child, something that's not supposed to be occurring to you, to actually begin to talk about that, to make that outcry, how much courage that takes. And so now that centers like Harold's House come along, when that child makes that outcry, let's say they're at school and they say something to a teacher, and we call that an outcry when a child actually talks about it, and the teacher makes that report. Now children are able to come to Harold's House, and through the police or through CPS, the Child Protective Services, they bring the child with a non-offending caregiver, a family member who isn't the person who's accused of possibly doing something to them. They come to the center, and they're able to get all their services under one roof. Mm-hmm. And so they're not jumping and hopping from place to place, from agency to agency. And we're also designed to be child-centered. So when you walk in our building, it doesn't look like an institution. It's friendly. We've got a big fish tank. The kids run to that. Yeah. They love it. We've got friendly paintings on the wall and nice welcoming colors. It looks like somebody's house. Uh-huh. And the playroom looks like someone's living room. So children are able to come there and they get what's called a forensic interview, which is a non-leading interview by someone who's dressed in just regular street clothes that just helps facilitate them telling their story.
Sure.
And this story is recorded, audio and visual recorded. And in the next room, professionals are sitting and listening to that interview. Police officers, CPS, maybe someone from the district attorney's office. And they're listening and watching that. And so they can watch that interview once it's recorded multiple times. And the child doesn't have to tell their story over and over and over. So it cuts down on the chances of the child being re-traumatized.
Right.
And while that's happening, we help the families understand what the process is and what they're going through. And one of the best things that I love to say about Harold's House is that no one ever has to pay a dime when they come through for services. You don't have to worry about what your insurance is.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about what you have in your pocket. You just come in and receive the services thanks to the wonderful support of our community and our giving organizations.
Awesome. Great. One thing I want to touch on is the name of the agency, Harold's House.
Yes.
Tell us about your namesake and where that name came from.
Harold was a police officer with Lufkin Police Department. He was a lieutenant, Lieutenant Harold Cottle. And his daughter is actually the head of this organization that I'm sitting in right now.
Right.
So we're just related in all kinds of wonderful ways. And Harold had a real passion for children in need, children who'd been abused and needed support through his calling in law enforcement and what he encountered. And so he was one of the people who were the founding fathers and mothers, as we might say, of our organization. Been around 13 years now since we've been around, and it started originally, it had an office near downtown, right across from the police department.
Okay.
And when it grew and expanded, it started out being called the Angelina Alliance for Children. And once our services moved beyond the borders of Angelina County into our two other, we changed it and named it after Harold because of his wonderful founding work. So we have a photo of him up in our organization.
Well, in fact, in the room that we're recording this in right now, here at the Family Crisis Center, we have a picture of him on the wall.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
He had a huge impact on this community.
Sure.
His whole family has had a huge impact on this community.
I want to move on to talk a little bit about things that y'all may have seen in regards to the effect of sexual assaults on children. What kind of a difference is there between, I guess, an adult's reaction and the way they handle something like that and the way a child handles that?
Well, it can depend, and a lot of times a child doesn't know something is wrong. It may feel wrong to them. They may sense that it's not okay if an adult's acting suspicious or they're trying to hide something. But a child, depending on what age they are and what they've been taught, may not even understand that it's something wrong. And this is what crosses the boundaries of what love and affection are and what relationships are with caregivers. And it may affect their bodies too. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we had a sexual assault nurse examiner who does physical examinations of children, and our advocates also who work with the families there. And a lot of times our nurse is able to have those conversations with children to tell them that their body's okay.
Yeah.
Even if they have a wound or an injury, that will heal. And it doesn't mean that they've been permanently damaged as a person. A lot of times the children are afraid this has changed me in some way that is substantial and lifelong. But a lot of times they're able to get reassurance from our staff members. No, this is something that happened to you and you can overcome this and heal.
Yeah. And that's probably, and I would just guess that might be something even a perpetrator takes advantage of, is the fact that a child may not know at an early age that something that has happened to them like that may be wrong.
Right. We have something that's called grooming, which is where a perpetrator begins to break down the boundaries slowly over time with touches, or maybe showing a child dirty pictures or telling them a dirty joke, or just trying to get them into situations where they may not, be very comfortable, and they try a little more and they try a little more. Rarely does an abuser just suddenly attack a child. That can happen. But most of the time they're breaking down those boundaries of trust. And that's another thing that is insidious about child sexual abuse, is that so many of their emotional boundaries have been broken down.
Yeah.
And sometimes, to be honest, depending on what age the child is, it can even feel good to their body, especially if they're in puberty. Mm-hmm. And that physical response that they have is confusing because they know they're not supposed to be having that response with that person. And so that can also really hurt and damage, their sexual relationships, their whole lives.
Right. Do you see, I guess, in the area that you serve, do you see a lot of instances regarding sexual assault of children. I guess how common is it here in rural East Texas?
Well, unfortunately, we do see a lot of it. I wish I could say that we don't, but we do. And we are frequently working with children. The national statistic is 1 in 10 children. This happens to 1 in 10 children, and it's estimated that only about 1 out of 10 of those ever talk about it.
Well, that was going to be my next question. It's probably a lot of it depends on if a child comes forward or not.
Right. I can tell you that the latest data we have in 2019, we're still finishing up our 2020 data, but from 2019, our primary victims, the children that things happened directly to, that we interviewed 520 children. And there were 922 secondary victims or family members. Out of those 520, more than 70% is child sexual abuse. So the majority of what we see is unfortunately child sexual abuse.
Do you see a lot of parents or relatives not being able to accept that this may have happened to their child, or being in denial that this has happened, like this can't happen to my child?
We do see that sometimes. Of course, nobody wants to think that this may have happened to their children. So, sometimes it's shock. It may be fear of the family finding out, or what will the community think. And then we do have, unfortunately, those non-supportive family members who just don't want to believe that something's happened, or maybe they'll choose a boyfriend over their child. Those are very unfortunate occasions because the child's not getting the loving support that they need for healing.
And I would think you probably see the same thing that we see at the Family Crisis Center, is just in the community in general. Oh, this doesn't happen here in our backyard, or this doesn't happen at our school or at our church or in our family. Not us, not East. That's the big cities or the dangerous parts, of communities. That's where that happens, not here.
Right. People think that it only happens somewhere else.
Right.
But it happens here. The common statistic among these child victims is that 90% of the time it's somebody they know. And so we know the vast majority of child sexual abuse is done by our family members, our friends, our neighbors.
Right.
Someone we know and trust in very often those circumstances. And so there's betrayal that happens in the family. I remember years ago I was training a group of teachers, and a teacher said, "But when we make a report, we destroy families," she said. And that was difficult to hear, but I was really glad that she said it, because we were able to talk about it. And I said, the destruction is already going on. It's just happening within the confines of the child's body, mind, and spirit. And so we need to hold on while the boat rocks, while the adults around that child can circle the wagons and protect that child and get them the support that they need.
Sure. How do you even begin? You have a child that's been a survivor of a sexual assault. How do you even begin to heal the trauma that a child receives? And I'm not really obviously talking about the physical trauma, but just even the mental toll on a child. How do you even begin to start the healing process?
Well, I would say, at the beginning, healing is a very individual process. So we can't necessarily put a map on it that's the same for everybody. So I want to be careful to say that, because every victim deserves to have the process that they want and that they need. But the very first thing is that the abuse has to stop. You can't begin your healing from your trauma unless the abuse has stopped. A lot of people, may not think about that, but we have to interrupt the process.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, and that has to completely stop. And then talking about it, being able to open up in a safe space to a counselor, to somebody who's had experience working with children who've been in trauma, especially sexual trauma, trauma-focused counselor, we call them, and to be believed. To have someone who hears your story and believes you.
Exactly.
If a child is not going to be believed, chances are they're going to shut down and they're not going to talk about it.
And see, and that pains me, because I've heard of instances where a child may make an outcry and an adult may not believe them.
Yes. And outcries are rare. They happen, But more often it's seeing some behavior changes in a child. It's seeing some things that they say that tip us off. So
Well, and let's go ahead and talk about that. You brought up a good point. As for parents, family members, friends of families, teachers, whoever is in contact with children, what are some of the signs that someone needs to look for in a child who may be experiencing sexual abuse or sexual assault?
one of the first things are the physical injuries. Those are less often. Those happen less often. It's usually more often behavioral changes. But when we do have physical injuries, we want to pay attention to those. Any kind of damage in a private area to a child, to their genital areas, to their bottom, to their mouths, any kind of unusual rash in very small children, not just a diaper rash, but something that looks strange. Unfortunately, sometimes if an offender has a sexually transmitted disease, they can pass that along to a child. So a parent may see something that's very unusual that they're not sure what it is, or any kind of damage or injury would be an immediate response, of course, to take them to the doctor.
Right.
Or make a call to law enforcement. Changes in behavior. Abused children, they'll be scared or anxious. They might be depressed or withdrawn or more aggressive. Their grades might be dropping suddenly. Sometimes, especially younger children who've been toilet trained can have differences in toileting. They can suddenly totally reverse their toileting. And suddenly be soiling themselves. Sometimes it's a physical issue if they're unable to control their bowel or bladder due to damage from abuse, which is a horrible thought, but unfortunately occurs. But it can also be a psychological issue. So we call that returning to earlier behaviors like sucking their thumb, bedwetting, some things that they, hadn't been doing before, suddenly afraid of a particular person or a particular place, and it's really just red flags for paying attention as a parent or as a caregiver. Maybe there was just a big dog there last time they visited someone's house and they got scared, something like that. But it's, asking if they're okay. Is there anything you need to talk to me about? And we can get, more into that if you want to in a minute. But
Sure.
Changes in their eating and sleeping habits in school. Some children do even change their hygiene. They'll stop taking care of their bodies because they're trying to discourage somebody from touching them. So that's something that we might not thinking about. Older children become risky, very sexual, drinking a lot, doing a lot of drugs, driving very fast. Those kind of risk-taking behaviors become very angry, run away, lashing out. So those are the kinds of things that we can see.
Wow. Okay. Do you ever find a common thread amongst child survivors? Is there kind of something common that runs through that you see, or is there such a thing?
I really think one of them is that really important, that 90% statistic, that more than 90% of the time they know their abuser. And so it's a broken relationship in a terrible way, in a traumatic way. I would say in East Texas, it's much closer to 100% because that 90% is a national statistic. But here in East Texas, we have very, very few stranger assaults.
Right.
It is important to teach your children stranger danger, that rhyme that we use, stranger danger. Whenever I go into schools and talk to children, they all know that rhyme and they know what that means. Not as many are taught the safety rules of the people who are closest to them. And so one of the quickest ways to cut down on this kind of abuse is to eliminate one-on-one situations in your child's life where there's one adult and one child alone together. If you don't need to have that situation in your child's life, eliminate it. For example, if you were going to drop your child off at someone's house for a music lesson, you wouldn't drop them off. You would stay there for the music lesson.
Yeah.
So it's just an example. Or you wouldn't leave them alone with a youth director or alone with a coach, something like that. Maybe you need to be the volunteer parent to be the assistant coach to make sure there's two people, whatever it takes to cut down on those, because the vast majority of child sexual abuse happens in those one-on-one situations where there's an opportunity. Not that our children can't ever be alone with grandpa or grandma or something like that, but to make sure that they know it can be interrupted at any time and parents can always have access to their children.
And I think that's the biggest, or one of the biggest myths, even for us at the Family Crisis Center, dealing with sexual assaults, is that I think a lot of people are under the assumption that most of them are going to be strangers, the perpetrator. And even with adults, the majority of perpetrators are family members.
Yes.
I
can think of the thousands of cases I've seen in the years I've worked at Harold's House that have come through. I can think of maybe 2 that were stranger assaults that stand out to me as stranger assaults. It's always somebody that the family knows. And so that tells me that's a scary thing. But I like to say, turn that into a tool in your toolbox as a parent, as a caregiver. Use that as some intel, some information you can know that means the safety rules apply to everybody. Nobody is above the rules.
Right.
So everyone should respect a child's boundaries.
And I wonder if this is a difficult topic for some parents because of the fact that it is a difficult topic to talk about.
It is. And I really encourage parents to start early. There's a lot of stress and pressure about the sex talk, to have kind of the safety talk in with that. But I like to say, don't wait for one big, huge, really embarrassing, difficult, way too late sex talk.
Right.
But start early on with things like potty training, where you enable a child to clean their own body as soon as possible and say, this is your private area. You clean that. You can do that. You're such a good boy, such a big boy, such a big girl. So proud of you. No one else should touch you there in a way that hurts you or scares you or makes you feel uncomfortable. That's what I tell children when I go into schools, is no one should touch you in these private areas in a way that hurts you or scares you or makes you feel uncomfortable. And if that happens, talk to somebody.
And I'm thinking, and I don't know, I may be completely wrong, it may almost be easier to talk about something like that with a very young child before they get the knowledge that your private parts are more than just potty parts.
Right.
And I think maybe when they're younger, it might be easier to talk to them about that before embarrassment sets in.
Before the hormones hit, if you can possibly talk to them. And it becomes part of what I like to call a lifetime conversation about safety. It begins with potty training in the bathtub, my privacy when I'm getting dressed and I'm able to clothe myself. That matures into things on the playground, and then that matures into the dating conversations. We've done that I have 2 children. We've had those conversations with my own children over the years because of what I do for a living. And they may have rolled their eyes a couple of times.
Right.
Oh, Mom, I don't want to talk about that again. We don't want to talk about it all the time because we don't want to freak kids out.
Right.
Let's just revisit it. I just want to check in with you and make sure you know.
Sure.
And the children knew that. They knew that safety rule where they were never supposed to be alone with somebody. And so we had kind of a words for that. And I'd get a phone call. Hey, Mom, turned out the other kids didn't show up. And so it's just me and the band director. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm on my way. I'll be right there.
Yeah.
Those kind of conversations where it just becomes they're not scared. It just becomes part of the normal operation of how we conduct the family and what our safety rules are. And that's such a good lead into dating safety.
Right. All right. Before we move on, because I do want to talk to you just a little bit about you. Is there anything else that you want to make sure our audience knows about? Is there something that we haven't touched on that you really want to make sure people know about, or something that we haven't addressed that?
I want to say that the people I work with at Harold's House are so wonderful. They're all, none of us are this from your agency, none of us are in this because we're in it for the major accolades or for, the big wallet or anything like that. We love what we do. And I'm so thankful for the people I work with. I'm amazed at watching what they do every day, working with children in these heinous situations. And our agency partners, our law enforcement and our CPS and our DA's office and our counselors, everyone comes together to do this work that changes the lives of children. And it's an honor and a joy to be able to do it. But I just want to say I'm grateful for the team, because I can't say enough about how really good that they are.
Yeah, awesome. And I think we do have both of our agencies, I think, have a very good relationship.
Absolutely.
And I think, we help each other,
Yes.
in this cause. Ashley, I want to just ask you, what made you decide to? What is your background? Okay, you're the community education director.
Yes.
What does that mean? What do you do as community education director? What is your exact responsibilities?
Well, one of the primary things that I do is teach parenting classes to at-risk families, people who are working with CPS in the beginning of their cases. About the first 40 days of a case where CPS is working with a family in a difficult situation, and the parents maybe just need to pick up some skills. And so I'm doing them by Zoom now because of COVID, as we all are doing our jobs a little differently these days, but teaching them some basic safety information just to get some information into their hands, healthy communication, healthy discipline, anger management. So that's a big part of what I do. Working in schools to teach body safety, I have a program called No Go Tell that work with children. That is significantly changed due to COVID, as we're not allowed to get in as much as we were. But I've done a lot by recording on Zoom.
Yeah.
And setting. I have been able to get in person a little bit to some schools, so that's good. We've also partnered with Family Crisis Center to teach middle school and high school children about dating safety, body safety. You're never too old, really, for body safety when it comes to, ages 0 through 18. So talking to teens who may have never heard anything at all about the rights they have to their own bodies. And then I go and talk to media. For instance, if there's a case that's happened, I don't talk about the case itself due to privacy reasons, but I can put out good information for parents who may be seeing something and be frightened about how to handle situations like that with their own children.
What made you decide to do this line of work? Young Ashley going to school, what's your education background like?
Well, I'm a proud graduate of SFA, Axum Jacks. So graduated from there. I did an internship at our local newspaper, Lufkin Daily News.
Oh, wow, okay.
An old newspaper person, and did that career for several years.
Really?
And I think I was 7 years, I believe. I worked as a reporter, and I was the city editor.
See, I think I know your name more along for that. When did you start at Harold's House? When did
Harold's
you begin?
House, I started in 2013.
Okay, I think.
And I had a little jog in between there. I was a hospice chaplain for 3 years in between those two jobs.
Okay.
And so I was actually working as a hospice chaplain when I got recruited to come to Harold's House and to build this new position. Laura Squires, who was then the director, came and asked me if I'd consider doing this position that was a new thing for Harold's House, and I was excited about it. I just love working in jobs where I connect with community and can help identify situations where people need support, and that's what I love doing that as a reporter. I love doing that in hospice, and I've loved doing it at Harold's House.
Great. If someone needs to get a hold of Harold's House, are they normally referred to by law enforcement, or do they ever contact you directly? How does that work?
Children arrive through working with either law enforcement or CPS. And so a CPS worker or law enforcement will tell you that you have an appointment at Harold's House and where to go. People are always welcome to call us if they have questions, just in general. If you're worried about something that your child has said or done and you're just not sure what that means and could that be a red flag, they're always welcome to call us at 634-1999. Or they can email me, acook@heraldshouse.org.
Okay. Awesome. Ashley, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking some time and coming by to talk about the great work that you guys do. And I appreciate you taking some time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to make or share with us, we can do that. We do have our email address. That is conversationsandconnections@fccet.com. And also, if you feel like you need any of our services here at the Family Crisis Center, we do have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week hotline. That number is 1-800-828-7233. That's 1-800-828-7233. And as always, remember, be the voice, if not for you, for someone else.